Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF, and Hebrew name is Attrition. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. Thank you to all of our viewers, our supporters, for tuning into this briefing, whether you're watching live on Zoom, whether you're watching on YouTube. It's a great privilege to be joined today by the one and only Danny Seaman. Danny, thank you so much for joining today.
So, as always, it's my pleasure.
Danny, let's start off this briefing with a new front of the war, right? We talk about Gaza, we talk about Lebanon, we talk about Iran, Yemen, but there's also this war of attrition that Israel is dealing with right now. That months and months and months into this war, Israelis just want to get on with their lives. And although we can't forget what's happening around us, sometimes you don't feel like you're on the front. And when a country doesn't feel like they're in war, they start to make mistakes, and the social unrest is now returning to Israel. Maybe we're letting our guard down. So, Danny, my long-winded question to you is this war of attrition setting us up for potentially a repeat of an October 7th, that we no longer are prepared for what could happen? And reaching the anniversary of October 7th, we could be caught blinded again.
It's a good question. It's really the atmosphere has been, especially since the beginning or the end of the weekend, since the weekend when we had the tragic news. Instead of focusing all our attention on who was responsible for this, the circumstances were manipulated by those who have a political interest, unfortunately, here and abroad, by the way. And Israel there's two reasons for it's not actually taking a step back. They're not increasing the assault in Gaza because of the fact that we're right now in negotiations. And anybody making the accusations that the government of Israel is not considerate of the hostages and not, it's nonsense. It's such a multi-layered situation and so complex. You have on the one hand the negotiations, but let's not forget, and they tend to see, and we seem to forget this whole situation here, and we go back to what we've been doing for years, is basically negotiating amongst ourselves. And there is no Hamas in this whole equation. They're the Americans and the supposedly the representatives of the Arab side, which is Egypt on one hand, who have a vested interest in what happens along the border for many reasons, not only for the border and politically, but also because they were financially benefiting off of the smuggling of weapons into the Gaza Strip. And then you have Qatar, who are the funders of the Muslim Brotherhood, who are the most extreme element within Islam, and they're also the funders of Hamas. But you're not really negotiating directly with Hamas, and Hamas has made their position very clear. Israel has to leave Gaza Strip absolutely completely and end the war. And they have not changed their position over months. So that being in the background, you do have the negotiations going on. And the Americans saying that this will be the final offer. Who exactly are they offering it to? And it seems easy for them to apply pressure to Israel. So while this is happening with all that going on, so Israel is not looking to escalate the situation there, but address the different problems. By the way, maybe an idea for you next week. I saw that there was a group of former commanders who, I don't know if this was mentioned yesterday. I didn't see the webinar, but who have a very interesting idea of how to address the issue in northern Gaza that could put pressure on Hamas without harming the population there. It's maybe an issue you want to address. It sounds very interesting. One of the most reasonable suggestions that have been raised recently. But that's another issue. Going back to it, Israel is addressing the threats coming and returning to locations that we felt that we finished the combat in. But then you have our major focus right now is in Judea and Samaria. And that's not at the same level of what is going on in Gaza. We're not using planes to bomb it because you also don't have the underground, at least not to the extent that you had it. There have been some underground facilities found in Judea and Samaria and the Arab towns and villages. such as Kalkilia, such as Jenin, that are being addressed right now, and Hebron, which to which Israel is trying to undermine or extract the terrorist element that has been supported there by Iranian factions and weapons being smuggled into. So that's where our focus is at the moment, because this became a major threat. And then you have the continued situation, which I think that is the most tiring, because there doesn't seem to be a response that is satisfactory to the public here, which is in the north of Israel. Hezbollah continues to bomb daily civilian areas there, and Israel is not responding except for taking out some leaders here and there. It's not deterring Hezbollah in any way. We're weakening Hezbollah, but not deterring them. I don't know what the reason is for that. I do know that the government, the prime minister, they're obvious. It's obvious that they're aware of the fact that the public are not happy about what's going on and the displeasure, because it's terrible what is happening in the north of Israel. So why are they not responding? Could be one of two reasons. One, we may not be able to. And then you don't want to mention that. You don't want to say that for whatever reason. I doubt that, for simply because when we needed to address the issue with Hezbollah, and here you've spoken about that in several of the briefings here, we responded in a way that military experts around the world, all I can summarize it, military experts in the world are holding this to be an unimaginable response that can be taught and learned by, and when people talk to you about what does Israel contribute to the United States, that's exactly it. Like the R&D for the American military comes from Israeli abilities, such as what happened when we took out the 6,000 missile silos, I think it's about already a month ago. So as this is going on, it is draining the public, because you don't have the daily events that are focused on. And the government did say that this would take a while. So then at the same time, you have political elements that are moving into the supposed vacuum. And this basically is being fed by media. And this goes back to my expertise, that the media constantly has to report on things, and it has to be new, and controversy is always good. And unfortunately, they're the ones feeding the controversy. And they're the ones building this for their own interests. Could be political, but I'm saying it's even, I think, was this for my computer, I believe. The media is doing it for its own, also political, but also so people watch them. And the controversies between the public here are being manipulated by the media, are being blown out of proportion. You're getting a wrong version of this abroad, because they're trying to create an impression that the majority of the public in Israel agree with this and want to stop, don't want to continue with the battle, and want to free the hostages. And that's not what is actually happening here.
Danny, that's a great point to focus on for a minute. One of the reasons we do these briefings is so that we can bring our perspective and the Israeli perspective on the street, so to speak, to our audience abroad. Obviously, we have many viewers here in Israel as well, but very often abroad, you're watching CNN or Fox News, whatever the news is, it's giving a certain perspective. So, Danny, tell us right now, most Israelis, they want to see a continuation of this war, or they want to close things up and go back to business as usual. What's the word on the street right now?
I think that the way of describing it is different. It's not that we want a war to continue. Nobody wants a war, but we understand we're at an existential moment. And part of that is the fact that it doesn't matter what extent and what level of destruction you have in the Gaza Strip. The Hamas does not care. They do not care about their civilians. On the contrary, the civilian victims only help them in achieving what they want to achieve. They want to be, even if it's the last man, even if Sinwar himself is the only person left in the Gaza Strip, and he's standing, there's a victory as far as they're concerned. And this is part of the entire Islamic concept. The individuals are irrelevant. The individuals serve a purpose of the victory and the elating of Islam itself. And here with Israel, as we are the infidels, they had a huge victory on October 7th. Everything since then is irrelevant as far as they're concerned. But what they're seeing is the debates and the discussions and the arguments going on in our society. And they see that as a weakness that they have to manipulate. So they're continuing with that. And as they say, for them, this is a huge event in the history and the annals of Islam, unless we can make it clear to them that they lost. And how do they lose? It's not only the absolute control over that area. And by the way, I can pause for a moment on that and address this issue. Not everything that you're hearing in the media, and that's obvious, and that's the point we're making here, is what's happening. Also, I'll address the one issue, and that's the point I'm trying to make here is connected to it, is the day after. And everybody said, what do we do the day after? Should we do this or that? The day after is already in process. And you can see several things. First off, what we're doing around the Philadelphia route. Second is the Netzarim route inside of Gaza. Third is other things that are happening, the complete demolition of positions there. And now the talk within the government of taking control over the food and the civilian aid that is going over there, and having a military governor general of the Gaza Strip. And this has been historically been the way Netanyahu conducts himself. Understanding media, understanding the Western way of addressing things, he'll say or won't elaborate on particular things and do what is necessary on the ground. Right now, from what I'm observing, I can see that in many ways, we are doing what is necessary for Israel on the ground. And that takes time. It takes time to address these issues and create literally the groundwork for the next stage, which will be several years of Israel control over that area and determining what direction it goes. But also, it requires the destruction of the Hamas and not allowing them the ability to rearm and rebuild themselves. Now, a lot of Israelis understand that. Israelis are looking to totally defeat the Hamas. Now, I can say beyond that, with all due respect to those demonstrating in Tel Aviv, when you had one of those aircrafts, the unmanned aircrafts, crash in Tel Aviv and kill one individual, Israel completely took out the threat that we had at that time from Yemen. So most people in Tel Aviv feel very secure and haven't lived the lives, and I'm not even talking about October 7th, I'm talking about for the past 20 years that Israelis in the south lived, in Ashkelon and in Sderot and in the kibbutzim, in Ofakim, and even in Beersheba. Israelis in those areas are not willing to go back. And with all, even if you say 200,000, 300,000 demonstrators, which is not even close to the number of those who demonstrated on the weekend in Tel Aviv, and I repeat, in Tel Aviv, there are over 300,000, 500,000 people in the south of Israel. They do not want to go back to the life they held before. Their children have been held hostage, and I can talk personally from my own family. When I have my nieces and nephews who were 4 years old when this started, they're now 24. They all suffer from PTSD. And now their children, my mother's great-grandchildren, are suffering the same thing. They don't have to live a life like that. So with all due respect to the people in Tel Aviv, the people in the south of Israel and the north of Israel, for that matter, their lives count as much, but under the circumstances, more than what the opinion of the people in Tel Aviv is. But you don't hear them because they're not out demonstrating, because they have to live their lives. They have to make a livelihood. They have to try to fix the lives that have been disrupted there in the south of Israel. So they can't waste their time with demonstrations. And this is not getting a voice in the Israeli media. And unfortunately, we know, and as I've said, those who follow these briefings, as I said before, most of the foreign media here get their information from Haaretz newspaper. Haaretz newspaper certainly does not represent the absolute majority of the Israelis. They represent a small elite. And they believe they have a condescending attitude towards the rest of the public in the state of Israel. And unfortunately, that doesn't, and the public in Israel do not care what the people in Tel Aviv are saying. They care about the hostages. They care about them perhaps even more because many of the people in the South not only have relatives and have lost relatives and friends, etc. So they've lived what is going on in the South for many years now. And that's the true feeling of the people of the state of Israel, which the government of Israel is reflecting.
Danny, that's a great perspective, certainly on the local media here in Israel. Let's talk for a second about the international media, because I think a lot of our viewers deal with that on a more daily basis. You know, before we went live, we were just discussing about this slogan, this battle cry, from the river to the sea, and how the Meta board deemed it's not considered hate speech, which is so outrageous. And that's like the level of argument and where the world is in terms of anti-Semitism and hating Israel and Jews. And then we have, for example, our wonderful, wonderful viewers who are always asking me, you know, dozens and dozens, hundreds of emails every week about the minutia of this war, from the technical legal underpinnings to international law and battle plans. And they have this sense of, we can just get out the true information, the true facts, and we can change the public discourse. And like, these two approaches are so fundamentally different. You have the Meta board making this outlandish decision, and you have our people saying, no, let's just show them the truth, and they'll see. Well, what do you make of all of that?
Oh, it's very complex, and it's I think one of the problems is that the state of Israel, though it understands that the cognitive warfare is very much part of the battle being waged here, they don't really address it in a way. Now, even if we did do that, and I'm mentioning this because that is an issue at hand right now inside the government levels in Israel, we can't win just by the fact that we are small in numbers. The fact that the issues themselves, we're on the right, it doesn't matter, because you have a manipulation that's been going on for over 40 years. And the joining of hands, and this goes into the broader element of what has happened in the deterioration of Western society, and the fact that Marxist positions have taken over, and they use them, they call it woke, they don't call, but if you go back to it, it's Saul Alinsky, and it's Marxism, and it's all these elements that are affecting and fighting Western civilization, and first and foremost, the United States. Americans may be waking up to it right now, but still the manipulation that is happening and the manipulation of elements such that can affect public perception, such as the media, obviously, academia, culture, and that goes as for Hollywood and artists, etc. All these elements that, in a way, they frame not only the concepts, but they also create the perception of how people in the West perceive reality to a degree. They're all functioning, who more, who less, to the dictates of this Marxist attempt to undermine the United States. And it's first and foremost the United States, because it is the essence of Western civilization right now. And the unity with Israel is very simply put, the values in which the United States was created are the values of Judaism, and then the extension of Judaism to Christianity. So, and basically I can put it in simple terms, good versus evil. And many people, especially those with religious background, whether Jewish or Christian, have a very natural understanding, even if they don't know all the details, of what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil. Unfortunately, because I won't say unfortunately, but part of Western civilization is also religious freedom. You can be religious if you want. If you don't want to, that's also fine. So there is a lacking of that moral understanding of what the principles of Western civilization are. You know, the whole Enlightenment, that's the irony of it. The whole Enlightenment movement was based on religious concepts to the positive elements of it. But I won't go into the theological and the philosophical elements of it. My point being here is very simple. That very simple. I can't get to the simplistic point of it. That when you're dealing with the perceptions of what is happening with Israel, we're outnumbered. Even if you say all the Christians in the United States or the evangelicals support Israel, there's 1 billion Muslims, and I'm not even going to the supporters of Islam that are not Muslim. So we're automatically outnumbered. But I think one thing anybody knows who follows history is eventually history has shown that the truth does prevail. It takes a while, it takes time, and that's where we're at the moment. People are waking up to it. People are acknowledging it. People are seeing how they're being deceived and lied to in many ways. And I think one of the things that happened, it may have been a very painful day last weekend when our hostages were executed, but that's raising a lot of questions with people who are open-minded. They may feel that Israel, they're on the side against Israel, but then suddenly, all right, if we're on this side, why are they executing civilians? And you take the DNC, for example, when you had Hirsch's family speak there to them and how it affected them, all those who were affected by the mother's speech, to suddenly have him executed just a week later, I think it raises a lot of issues with these people. So on the long run, it does work to our benefit. And we have to remember, we're not in an empty sphere. It's not just Islam. You have the Chinese in their interests, you have the Russians in their interests, and all this is working against us. And unfortunately, while they are focused on what they want to achieve, the West doesn't know what it wants to do with itself. We go back to the situation pre-World War I and certainly pre-World War II, but only when things get really terrible, and I hope we don't reach that position. We in Israel are there. And even here amongst us, we continue to bicker and argue. So even being in that kind of circumstances doesn't always provide you with the total awakening that happened in World War II.
Danny, I want to ask you one more question. And I appreciate all of your time, and I'm really appreciative of all the viewers who are sending in all of these questions. Final question is, and we're not going to get too political here. We try to stay away from politics, believe it or not. When former prime ministers in Israel make statements that are very much contrary to the beliefs, let's say, of people in IDSF, what is the proper response? Should we be taking to social media? Should we be penning articles and countering their opinions, but at the same time bringing them to light? Or do we just hope it's a slow news day and we pass up those stories and not shed light and highlight them?
Well, one of the problems we do have here right now in the international sphere, if we were talking before of the cognitive warfare, is the fact that some prominent Israelis, and I'm not even talking about people that are with left-wing organizations and nonprofits who just yesterday, one of them appeared. These left-wing organizations have been consistently over the years undermining Israel's position in the world. I'm not even talking about them. If you go to political figures, you have 4 former prime ministers here. One, and you can't give him much respect. He's a complete numbskull, which is Lapid. You have Bennett, who tries to do a good job for Israel, but here in Israel, he's despised. And then you have Ehud Olmert, who is a criminal, who is a corrupt individual. And it's not only, I don't even want to address him because he sat in jail, and instead of being shamed and sitting and leaving Israel alone, he's still meddling in the politics here. And the left-wing media in Israel gives him a platform because he's critical of Netanyahu. But the most important one and most influential one has been Ehud Barak, who unfortunately has been very vocal and appearing on media and not critical of Israel, but completely being despicable in the way he describes things here. And he's been very much part of the attempt to overthrow the democratically elected government in the state of Israel. And this is one of the elements that people don't understand abroad. When they criticize the extreme government, it's not extreme. The government, the media here present them as being extreme, but they were elected freely in the state of Israel, and they represent a majority. And yet Ehud Barak refuses to accept that. But this person who is connected to Epstein, and there's evidence, and there were former young girls who were part of the Epstein island who have spoken out openly in the Western media about Ehud Barak. So you understand that his moral corruption, there's also a lot that he has to hide. And he's very happy and you see that the Western media has not been pursuing it very much as the Israeli media has been ignoring the moral fiber of Ehud Barak and what is eliciting him to take these positions. Or as you say, he's being held in a very sensitive area of his body by those who have an interest in him doing what he is doing. So that's all I can put. If those are the people you want to follow and you want to believe, choose the people that you're believing. That's your right to do that, but understand what their interests are and what is behind what they're trying to do.
Thank you, Danny, for laying all that out. I, in a very PC way, said former prime ministers, and you gave all of the dirty laundry. So hopefully our viewers appreciate your analysis of all of that. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to this briefing. Danny, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. We will be back with you next week, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel on Monday. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.